that is affecting every American family with inflation. And now 3 banks of our 4 largest banks have closed, are in a debt problem. Nothing has changed since then. The only thing that has changed is the House has raised the debt ceiling and passed the bill. That's why we had a meeting today. Everybody in this meeting reiterated the positions they were at. I didn't see any new movement. The President said the staff should get back together, but I was very clear with the President. We have now just 2 weeks to go. If Chuck Schumer could pass something, we'd go to conference right away and solve that. But I don't think Chuck Schumer can pass anything. They haven't dealt with it. Unfortunately, the President has waited 97 days without ever meeting. Every day I asked, could we meet? And he said no. The House has raised the debt ceiling in a responsible manner, curb our spending at the same time, bring us economic growth. And I asked the President this simple question. Does he not believe there's any place we could find savings? He signed a bill that the House passed, became law, that the pandemic is over. We have $50 to $60 billion that have sat out there that's been appropriated for more than 2 years that we could pull back and save the taxpayer money. We could put in growth packages that help us economically, cutting the red tape so we could build things in America again. We could have items that he actually voted for, like work requirements that just passed in Wisconsin with 82% of the vote, to help our supply chain get stronger. I would hope that he would be willing to negotiate for the next 2 weeks so we could actually solve this problem and not take America on the brink.
Well, as I think all of you know, I've been through a few debt ceilings over the years. Let me first make the point, the United States is not going to default. It never has, and it never will. However, elections have consequences. We now have divided government. We didn't have a divided government last year. In 2019, I told President Trump, who was no fan of Speaker Pelosi, that they needed to work it out. Why? We had divided government. The solution to this problem lies with 2 people: the President of the United States, who can sign a bill and deliver the members of his party to vote for it, and the Speaker of the House. There is no sentiment in the Senate, certainly not 60 votes, for a clean debt ceiling. So there must be an agreement, and the sooner the President and the Speaker can reach an agreement, the sooner we can solve the problem.
Mr. Speaker?
Yes.
Did the President tell you that there were any spending cuts that he would be open to?
Well, I asked him numerous times, are there some places we could find savings? He wouldn't give me any, so I'm hopeful that we'll be able to find them. You can't spend more money, which his budget does, than the pandemic. They added $6 trillion when they're in the majority, and what happened? We got inflation. We hurt every family in America. I think the best thing we can do is find places that we can eliminate waste, find places that we can grow this economy, and that's exactly what the House bill does. Look, I would have loved to have spent from February 1st on working together and negotiating something. Unfortunately, he would never meet with us. So I had to look for things that Democrats had agreed to before. Like, Senator Manchin believes that we should cap the growth going forward. So we would take the next 10 years and we would spend more each year, but only 1%. That would save us a lot of money. We would find savings like COVID money, bringing it back. We would find ways to grow the economy by making us energy independent, lowering the cost of energy, but at the same time changing the red tape on the permitting reform so we could build things again. I thought that was a common ground idea that we can all get together on. So we had made sure that we wouldn't go into default, so the House raised the debt limit and also had growth for the rest.
Yes. I wanted to ask you, was there movement forward in this? Do you feel confident that June 1st deadline?
I didn't see much difference in the statements from the President or from Chuck Schumer, for that fact. I mean, Chuck's whole idea before was to take us to the brink and someone's going to have to break, right? I don't want to play politics with this. I think this is too important. That's why 3 months ago I came to the president. Can't we find a way? I know we're both going to have to give and take. That's the way the founders have created our government. A House, a Senate, the executive branch. So let's sit down together, find places we can agree upon, and get this done. Because they ignored us, we had to go on our own, and we passed a bill to do that. Yes.
What are the odds of default now after this meeting, and what happens next?
Well, the House made sure we wouldn't have default because we raised the debt limit. Now the Senate hasn't done anything. Well, the Senate hasn't done anything. That would come down really to Chuck Schumer and the president. The House made sure we wouldn't default. We are ones who raised the debt limit. We've sent it to the Senate. We've sat with the president. I've tried to for 97 days. He has said no. I think the only reason we are actually here today is because we passed something. But I hope you only got about 2 more weeks to try to get this done.
Mr. Speaker, Congress does have the purse strings here, and if you are not able to prevent default, are you prepared to own it?
Well, I don't see how we would own it if we raised the debt limit. So if I look back, the House raised the debt ceiling, the Senate has not, and the president hadn't negotiated. So I find that very odd,
Mr.
yes.
Speaker, did the president bring any proposals to this meeting? And is there a plan for another meeting after this? When would that be? And one question to Leader McConnell, how is the president's posture in this meeting different than how you've seen him in the past over this very same issue?
The first part, and I'll turn it over to the leader. The staff will get together and we'll get back together the principals on Friday.
Well, I can tell you how it was done in 2019. After I told President Trump he didn't have any choice but to deal with the Speaker, he designated the Secretary of the Treasury, Mnuchin. The discussions began. Out of that was debt ceiling increase and a caps proposal that lasted for 2 years. So I come back to where I started. The solution is between the one person in America who can sign a bill into law and the Speaker of the House. And the sooner they get together, the better. If they get together, the bill will pass both the House and the Senate on a bipartisan basis.
Leader McConnell clearly said the United States will not default on its debt. Can you say the same, that the United States will not default on its debt?
Yeah, because the House raised the debt limit. I'm Speaker of the House. I'm not the leader of the Senate. I'm not the president. So your question is, will not default? I've done everything in my power to make sure it will not default. We have passed a bill that raised the debt limit. Now, I haven't seen that in the Senate, so I don't know.
What gives you that confidence, Mr. McConnell? What gives you that
said
confidence,
that
Mr.
he's
McConnell?
willing to negotiate over spending, but he's not going to do so with a gun to the head of the American economy. Did he reiterate that to you today? And what was
Well, what's interesting is I would never want to put any gun to anybody's head. That's why I came February 1st. I sat out here. I want to have something responsible. I want to have something sensible. And then I just say to you and the American public, would it be wrong if you took hardworking taxpayers' money and you had billions of dollars appropriated for a pandemic that is now over? Why wouldn't you pull that back? Would it be wrong to put some control? Remember what we're talking about. A debt ceiling is like your child having a credit card. We reached the limit. We're responsible for paying it. But would you just raise the limit without seeing how you're spending your money? That's all we're talking about. So I understand that the president has to sign it and it has to pass the Senate. So why couldn't we, for the last 97 days, talk about this? Why would it, when a president who was vice president before, if you look at all of his quotes, this is a man who prided himself. They called him the Biden negotiations. This is a man, the President Biden, when he was senator, he actually voted against debt ceilings because they said they didn't cut enough in spending. This is a president who, when he was vice president, Joe Biden, when it was a $14 trillion debt, said, we have to do something about this big debt that we have. It is now $31 trillion. I think every single household believes you need to be able to do something responsible and sensible, and that's what we've been trying to do for the last 3 months.
Leader McConnell, what gives you that confidence after this meeting, Leader McConnell, that there won't be a default?
What did I watch?
When you said that the U.S. has never defaulted and never will, what gives you that confidence right now to say that?
Yeah, look. the United States of America is not going to default. We are having a debate here in conjunction with raising the debt ceiling as to whether or not after dropping $2.6 trillion on the American people in the last Congress on a partisan vote, we ought to have at least some restraint on our spending related to the debt ceiling. And this is not unusual. We've been here before. Debt ceilings have frequently carried other measures. What we have here is we're running out of time, and it's time for the president to get serious and to sit down with the speaker and get a solution.
Remember what we're talking about here. No, just for all of you to understand what we're talking about, okay? The Democrats think it's really extreme that we want to say we should only spend the next year what we spent 5 months ago. They say it's draconian. What we spent 5 months ago is more than how much President Biden, at that time Vice President Obama, proposed to spend at this time. Were people being hurt? Were people not getting their veteran care? Were people not getting everything they asked for 5 months ago? That is what we're asking for. Is that too much? That we can raise the debt limit, spend what we spent 5 months ago, pull back that COVID money that has sat there for 2 years, put work requirements in that help the supply chain, help people get promoted and get more jobs, make us energy independent so Americans have a lower cost in their energy bills. Now, if they have a better idea, I'm sitting here like I have for the last 97 days. Tell me what it is.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Did you address the argument from the administration that House Republicans want to cut veterans' benefits? And then also, sir, are you confident that if the House Republicans would accept anything less than the House bill if the cuts were less?
Listen, first of all, cutting the veterans is a lie. Where in the bill does it say we cut veterans? You'll find next week when we do our appropriation bill, we increase the funding to veterans. But this is what I'm talking about. That type of behavior is pure political rhetoric. This is too important an issue to play political games with. So if one side's going to sit back and say those type of things, all I'm asking is that we spend the amount of money we spent 5 months ago. Were veterans getting their care 5 months ago? We're actually going to increase. And how the system works, it's just like any other household. You get a certain amount of income in, then you prioritize how you spend it. In our appropriation process, Republicans and Democrats alike will get to sit in committee and decide how much to spend. The difference is that we'll spend what we spent 5 months ago, and we can decide what our priorities. So we'll probably look with a fine-tooth comb. Where is there some waste in government? I'm sure every single American can point a lot out. So we can spend more on the veterans, and we can spend less on the waste.
If the president doesn't move, will you, for the sake of the country?
Well, this is so great for the sake of the country, and why I wanted to make sure we would never be in a place like this. 97 days ago, I sat in the Oval Office with the president and said, let's find an agreement. When he would not move and he would not negotiate, even though the majority of Americans believe that what you should do. And this isn't the same Biden that was a senator and a vice president who believed that we should negotiate, who always argued that you had to be together. But even though that he wouldn't do that, the House passed a bill to make sure for the American people that we wouldn't get there. And we were able to get yes, sir. Yes.
Was anything accomplished at today's meeting? One. Two, is this country looking down the road at future generations at 40, 50, $60 trillion in debt? When does the card max out?
Well, it's more than that, because when you think about this, and this is what the American public should think about, how do you get in a situation like this? You can put blame on all sides. You spend more money than you bring in. On a 50-year average, we normally spend about 21% of GDP. But what happened when the Democrats took the majority, they increased that to more than 24%. Now, is there enough money coming in? Well, on a 50-year average, we usually bring in about 17% roughly of GDP. Right now, we're at 20%. Do you know how many times we've ever brought in this much money or this higher percent? Only 2 times in modern history, in 1944 and 2000. So we have more money coming in at any given time. But what's the problem is they've increased spending by $6 trillion. So that brought us inflation. That brought us this problem. You have a $31 trillion debt. Now, what does that mean? That's bigger than our whole economy by 20%. We've only been in this situation by a percentage one other time after during World War II. Now, the real concern that I have, if you don't tackle or start tackling this problem now, you're harming all the future generations. I think every American would care for their children and their grandchildren. So is it too much to ask that we simply spend what we spent 5 months ago? Is it too much to ask to say, let's take that COVID money that you did not spend and let's give that back to the taxpayer to be able to raise the debt ceiling?
During the meeting, did you get the impression that the president could use other options such as invoking 14th Amendment?
None of that was brought up.
Did you say any
The
proposals?
president and yourself are part of that?
Yes. Well, what we agreed to is we'll have the staff come together and meet during the week, and we'll get back together on Friday and see if we get in place.
Or just the 2?
No, all 5.
Do you think any progress has been made?
I'm sorry, what?
This has been a month-long impasse.
3 months long impasse.
We've heard the dire warnings from the Treasury Secretary. Is this fight worth the risk to the U.S. economy?
No, that's why the House Republicans passed a debt ceiling bill, where we actually lifted the debt ceiling. The Senate has not. I mean, I've listened to Chuck Schumer all this time. He hasn't done anything. And I don't know what he needs in the debt ceiling. I know they passed in March, they made that Maine maple syrup month. If he needs that in the debt ceiling, I'm willing to agree to that too. But I wish they had stopped playing political game. That they would give you a, please let me finish. They'd stop giving the rhetoric to saying certain things are being cut or not. I want the American people to understand. Is it too much that we ask that we simply spend what we spent 5 months ago? Is it too much to ask that we find waste in government, like that 50 to 60 billion that we spent that no one used for COVID with the pandemic over? Is it too much to ask that we cut red tape so we could build roads and highways and solar and wind panels and make us energy independent? If that's too much for the Democrats, tell me what they think is right. Do they believe they should just keep spending their grandchildren's money and create more inflation? I think that's wrong. Yes, sir. I don't think a short-term extension does anything. We've got a timetable here. I know the president wasted 97 days. You know, I came and sat with him, and I told him that, listen, we should work together. Let's be responsible. I won't predetermine what we have to have. I think you should spend less than you spent last year since we spent too much money. I think we should find ways that we can grow this economy. He said he wouldn't, you reported this, how many times he sat there and said he wouldn't meet with us. Then he changed, even though he tweeted after that meeting that he has said he agreed to meet on ways to make the economy stronger and ways we would find savings. He changed, and he met with me the next day at the prayer breakfast and said we were going to get together. Well, he changed his mind apparently. And then he said we had to pass a budget that does nothing with a debt ceiling. Well, then Senator Schumer would tweet at us every day we had to have a plan even though he didn't produce one. Well, we produced a plan, we raised the debt ceiling, and we sent it to the Senate. The challenge here is the president wasted 97 days, and now the Secretary of Treasury has come and told us the date's even sooner. Thankful that we did something early so we wouldn't be in that problem. Now I got to see what the Senate could do so we could go to conference.
Mr. Speaker, a
Yeah.
jury just found Donald Trump liable of sexual abuse. Do you still support him?
You know what? I've been in this meeting. Let me find out what they say.
Do you think any progress has been made through this meeting today?
Well, the progress is made is that we were actually able to meet. So that's a difference in the president's take. For 97 days, he denied the ability for anybody to negotiate. I don't know how many times you asked him about it. I'd ask him every day. I offered to bring food to meet. I would do anything we could that we could meet together and work on a bill so we wouldn't be at this day. You know, what's interesting is I've said the same thing when it comes to the border. And now we have a problem with Title 42 this week. Now the House, same thing. I tried to meet with them to how we could secure the border. He treated the debt limit just like he treated the border. He ignored it. But in the House, we will pass a bill this Thursday that could secure our border, deal with the Title 42 so these millions of people cannot enter illegally. We are trying to find solutions. We're trying to be responsible. We're trying to be sensible. But I think what we really need is a partner that's willing to work together. It's unfortunate that they don't even want to talk.
Did the president bring any offers to this meeting? Did he propose anything, or did he just say that he doesn't like what you guys did and ask you to do something else?
Yeah, that's pretty much.
You've said that this has to be hashed out in the next few days in order to prevent Americans from feeling the impact of this.
Mm-hmm.
Can you assure them that they are not going to start to feel the economic impact?
Look, I am only elected to one house, and I think it's very important. Again, that's why I came here in February, the very beginning of February. I asked to meet sooner, but that's as soon as the president would meet with me. Think for one moment. Everybody knows how dire this is. This is the first time as President of the United States that he's had all four leaders together. Think of all the issues America has had, from the border, from inflation, from a bank crisis because of the inflation they created. Never once has he brought the four leaders together. He's waited to just 2 weeks before. And the real question would be, would he even bring us together had we not passed the bill? That's not a way to govern. I'm not holding anybody to any position. I'm simply saying, I want to meet. I want to work this out. I want to be respectful to your job. I want to be respectful to your position. So you know what we did? We told them exactly where we stood. We just didn't say it. We passed it to prove that we had the votes to do it. Because we don't want to take America down a path we wouldn't want. We wanted to do this months ago. But unfortunately, he has a lot of power.
You have not assured the
Yes.
public.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You have not assured the public.
He has the question. Thank you.
Afghanistan too, please.
But in fact, in 1862, 1933, 1968, and 1971, the U.S. did revolt. Is there like a plan B or something?
Look, What was concerning when I listened to the White House, they say they have no plan B. The only way to raise the debt ceiling is something has to pass the House and something has to pass the Senate. The House has done their job. So respectful to your question is, how can I guarantee? I'm not a senator, but what I can do is do our job in the House, and we have. Yes, sir. Yes.
So the first question, what topics are going to be brought up on Friday that were not discussed today? And finally, can you reassure the American people that everything is going to be okay?
Look, from a House perspective, again, we're doing our job. I wanted to do it months before, but it's hard to work with somebody who said you can't meet with them. You know, what's interesting, I love America and I love our form of government. And what's really it's designed to do is after an election's over, you come together and you negotiate. You find common ground. That's what I wanted to do the whole time. So when we devised our bill, I looked for ideas that Democrats had proposed, like capping spending going forward, pulling the COVID money. So that's what we passed. Last question.
Congressman George Santos has just been charged by federal prosecutors. Do you believe that he should be removed from Congress? Should he be allowed to?
I'll look at the charges. Yes. Last question.
You mentioned the Senate needs to vote. Do you think this can actually be resolved through regular order?
Well, through regular order, if we worked back in February 1st, the House could have passed a bill, the Senate could have passed a bill, we could have gone to conference, and we'd be all here doing the press conference together and talking. It's really difficult if this is the very first time the president would ever bring four leaders together. Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader on the Senate side, we get together almost every week we're in session. We might not even have a topic, and we'll vote different. I respect his position. I respect him as a leader of the Democrats. I tell him things that we're going to propose. We may not always agree, but that's the way it should work. You should be able to talk and negotiate. It is unfortunate that so many of you are here today because the president has denied us to talk for the last 97 days. I'm hoping that the next 2 weeks are different. I'm hoping this president understands, as the leader of this nation, that you can't sit back and hold the country hostage. You can't be so extreme in your views that you're not going to negotiate. And to the American public, we've been very reasonable. I think spending the amount of money we spent 5 months ago, regardless of whether the president thinks it's cutting or not, is sensible. Every household would do that. Anytime a household has a problem, they would get together as a family and they would decide their priorities. That's all we want to do. And we want to raise the debt limit and we want to make our economy stronger. Thank you all. Have a good day.
Yeah, I got you, Jay. Give it to Ed. Jeremy.
Good afternoon, everybody. And I'm proud to be joined by my colleague in the House and fellow Brooklynite, Hakeem Jeffries. So look, there was bad news and good news from today's meeting. The bad news. We explicitly asked Speaker McCarthy would he take default off the table. He refused. President Biden said he would. Leader Jeffries said he would. Of course, I said I would. But he wouldn't take it off the table. And instead of him giving us a plan to remove default, he gave us a plan to take default hostage. And that is a shame, because that makes things more complicated. The bottom line is very simple. There are large differences between the parties. If you look at what President Biden had proposed and you look at what Speaker McCarthy has proposed, they're very, very different. We can try to come together on those in a budget and appropriations process. But to use the risk of default with all the dangers that has for the American people as a hostage and say it's my way or no way, or mostly my way or no way, is dangerous. So we again repeat our plea to Speaker McCarthy. Take default off the table and let's resume negotiations in the budget process, in the appropriations process, where we have legitimate differences. That's the good news. The president asked the people from all four of the leaders and himself to start sitting down as early as tonight, certainly tomorrow, to see where we can come to an agreement on the budget and the appropriations process. There are probably some places we can agree and some places we can compromise, hopefully, but that has to occur as part of the budget appropriations process.
Thank you, Leader Schumer, and I thank President Biden for convening us to have this conversation. Under no circumstances should the United States default on our debt. America must always pay our bills. A default would be catastrophic for everyday Americans, for small businesses, for people all across the land. House Democrats have taken default off the table. Senate Democrats have taken default off the table. Senate Republicans, as just indicated by Leader McConnell, have taken default off the table. President Biden, from the very beginning, took default off the table. There's one group in Washington, D.C., extreme MAGA Republicans, who have indicated that they are willing to take us down the path of default. That is reckless, irresponsible, and extreme. We're thankful that President Biden has asked the four corners of the Capitol, along with the administration, to get together as early as this evening, if not tomorrow, to make sure that we can have a conversation about the budget, about the appropriations process, about spending and investments and revenue. And all four parties have agreed. Now, on timeline, let me just simply say, because there's been a narrative that has emerged from some of my friends on the House Republican side, that the delay, the reason why we're at this point, is because of inaction. Nothing can be further from the truth. President Biden and Speaker McCarthy met on February 1st. In that meeting, President Biden said, default is off the table, as it has been repeatedly during Democratic administrations and Republican administrations, including 3 times when we helped President Trump raise the debt ceiling without gamesmanship, partisanship, or brinksmanship. Simultaneously, we can have a discussion about the budget. President Biden said in that meeting, the administration will produce its budget for the American people by March 9th. The budget was produced by President Biden on March 9th. At the same time, he said, we need to understand the House Republican position. Produce your budget. March 9th came and went. No Republican budget. Week after week after week, through mid-March, into late March, into early March, into mid-April, all the way through to April 26, we saw no Republican plan, no Republican budget. And then on April 26, they passed one that was extreme, that put polluters over people, that dramatically cut Medicaid for disabled children and seniors, would cut veterans benefits as we understand it, would cut health care, would cut law enforcement, would cut a variety of things that would undermine the health, the safety, the economic well-being of the American people. That wasn't passed, the Default on America Act, until April 26. The next day, the House went out of session. They were gone and did not return until today, when President Biden reconvened us to urgently deal with this issue.
We'll take a couple of quick questions.
The House Speaker just came out here and said he's passed a bill to raise the debt ceiling, and you haven't, and that the ball is now in your court. What's your reaction?
It's the wrong question. You have to, every time we pass a debt ceiling, it's bipartisan. His bill doesn't have a single Democrat in support, and it gets us nowhere, because you have to negotiate to get these done. What's really troubling about the Speaker's position is it's a partisan bill, and he says take it or leave it, or we could default. By not taking default off the table, Speaker McCarthy is greatly endangering America and making it much harder to make progress on budget negotiations. And so the bottom line is very, very simple. Mitch McConnell himself has said that the Speaker has to come to some kind of agreement with the President, and said that the Senate is never going to pass the House bill. McConnell has said that. So the idea that he passed a partisan bill that has no chance of being signed by the President and no chance of passing the Senate, and instead uses it, as he said, one of the reporters asked him, are you going to hold a gun to people's heads? He didn't deny it. He didn't deny it. This is very troubling. But if we can come together on an appropriations budget process, as the way it's been done every time in the past, when President Trump was president, I was Democratic minority leader, I could have said, I'm holding it hostage unless we repeal the Trump tax cuts, your signature issue. I didn't do that. But McCarthy is saying, I'm holding it hostage unless you repeal the IRA, which was our signature issue, and is doing such good for the country.
You've talked several times about the regular budget and appropriations process, so how much actual discussion was there of a short-term increase to align it with the September 30th deadline?
We are going to meet tonight and tomorrow to try and begin talking about that appropriations process, about that budget process, to see if there can be some agreements. The disagreements are wide. And anyone who says my way or no way, and we're going to default, is not serving the country well, and I'm afraid that's what Speaker McCarthy is saying. Last one. Go ahead.
President Biden did the responsible thing, convening us the first day that the House was back in session after being out of town for close to 2 weeks. We had a honest, frank discussion about a path forward, and President Biden urged us to get together either later on today or tomorrow our respective teams to have a discussion about a path forward around the budget and the appropriations process, and everyone agreed. That's progress.
Thank you, everybody.
Is this the start of a negotiation?
Joe Biden. Joe Biden's coming out.
But he said the same thing about 25 different times.
Yeah.
But still, you're right.
A Russian man claiming to hold top-level secrets about Russian advanced bombers has just turned up at the U.S. southern border, seeking asylum. The man claims to have been an engineer at a production facility over in the city of Kazan, and he says that he possesses top-secret information about the White Swan Tu-160, which is the most advanced bomber in the Russian arsenal. U.S. border officials, they interviewed the man, and they determined that his story was in fact credible and eventually passed him off to the FBI, who are still in the process of interrogating him right now. However, analysts have pointed out that the fact that the story was even leaked to the public is an indication that perhaps the American government is encouraging other Russians who also hold top-level secrets to also escape to America. And if you thought that was interesting, well then you should click on that button below this video and check out Epoch TV, one of the best no-censorship video platforms on the internet. On there you will find awesome programs like American Thought Leaders.
We've now been, for 2 years, trying to obtain the unredacted emails. We're down to the last 50 pages. So that's where all the incriminating evidence is.
Crossroads.
One of the big things happening right now is what's taking place with Russia and China.
Counterpunch.
You will see information you've never seen anywhere else.
Facts Matter. I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed, and most importantly, stay free. As well as a plethora of great documentaries, wholesome movies that you can enjoy with your whole family.
If I reach 1 heart, I accomplish something.
Cooking programs, and my absolute favorite, programs about traditional art and traditional music, which can honestly uplift your mood and fill you with hope for the future. And the best thing about Epoch TV, at least in my opinion, is that there's no corporate backing and there's no allegiance to some anti-American agenda.
How dare you come to this peaceful community and try to scam these people?
What the hell are you talking about? But rather, it's just good, honest, wholesome content that's based in truth and tradition.
I saw him. It was incredible.
Something that you can actually sit down with your whole family and enjoy, knowing that some ideology is not about to be pushed upon you.
And who's fighting it? We're fighting it here at Epoch Times, and we need to keep bringing you the news.
And so again, if you'd like to check out Epoch TV, just click on that button below this video. You and your family will